welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is Adam Vengeance Clement.
Wow, that's a lot to live up to. Thanks for having me back.
That was when we went to college. You would show up late to class every day, bruises everywhere, raccoon eyes, and you just, like you had the makeup around your eyes. You just had, you were huffing and puffing. You were always mad. Your fists were hurting. Somehow you drove a Maserati every day. It was weird. And we always just thought, man, this guy. And then whenever you walked into class, you're like, hey, Adam, call me Vengeance. I am Vengeance. So I was like, do we call you that? Or are you saying you're that?
First, that was actually a really good casual impression. I'll give you that. Second, you could have taken the joke down a few notches and just run with the fact that I had really comically long hair in college.
You did. You had oh, yeah.
I did go through a bit of that post-scene phase.
Fallout Boy?
Yeah, little bit.
But yeah, it's just, so I was like, are you Vengeance? And you're like, well, if you have to ask. I'm like, wait, well, ask what? And we just, it was like a who's on first type thing. Yeah, and one day I just saw you walking on top of a lake, walking on water. It was really weird. You had a bowler hat on. You're like, call me Chance the Gardener. Chancey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really weird, man. You were quite the guy in college, but I was so busy I never really thought much about it until now. And
you've been busy. I've noticed just how many episodes you've been chugging along with everything. So congratulations again on 300 episodes.
Hey man, we got to keep our listeners around the world happy. Keep our number 3 in Ireland.
That's right.
Got Hong
number
Kong.
1 soon.
Oh yeah, dude. I'm hoping all right, whatever. I don't care. I've hit like 25 top 20s this year so far around the world. That's sure. Awesome, man. But good to have you back. So you've done Jason X with me. You've covered, let's see, the remake?
You've been all over the place, I feel like.
Yeah. There's a few Halloween. You've done some Halloween with me.
Halloweens.
Friday.
I feel like a Batman or two, maybe.
You did Batman. Yeah, you did Batman Forever, and then you also did Batman Returns.
That's right.
And so you're kind of the resident MFF Batman guy.
I appreciate that because I understand your stable of genre commentary is quite extensive, and I did bite the bullet in one of your movie roundup contests, your death matches, by picking, I think it was the one where you had to go with 1-word titles and 2-word titles and 3-word titles.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, true to form, grab that coveted Batman Returns, The Dark Knight, so on and so forth. And I did not win, did not get very far at that. But yes, I suppose if you're going to give me that title, it's somewhat befitting.
I think the MFF people, they love seeing funky squad.
That's right, and that's fair. That's fair.
They like to see the funk in there.
I accepted a humble defeat.
But in this one, you had a tough first round matchup too. You had someone gnarly. I forget who it was, but you had
it was. I knew my fate going into that one.
The random bracket generator was not pleasant to you on that one.
No, it was a rough matchup.
So this new movie coming out, Matt Reeves directed. We know his stuff from Let Me In. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes.
Cloverfield, yeah.
Cloverfield. Coming out from him. This guy is just a dude who came off of making billion-dollar properties with The Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I think those 2 sequels or prequels, and then I love Let Me In. I think it's a solid remake. Cloverfield.
Oh, wonderful, yeah.
Cloverfield
definitely defies convention on the Americanized adaptation circuit, I'd say.
And what I like about Let Me In as a remake is that it feels like a companion piece to Let the Right One In and not a ripoff. And sure. That's when I feel like so the Crazies 2013, the Crazies 1973, I feel like they complement each other in different ways, and that's why remakes should exist, and that's why I kind of love them. So this guy, he has been churning out big hits. He has a lot of momentum behind him.
Big J.J. Abrams bestie too, I think.
Yeah, he's friends with like the biggest people out there. But then he also has Cloverfield, Let Me In, and the War for the Dawn and War for the Planet of the Apes. So he's directed his own blockbusters. So this movie seems like it's his story to tell. I know Ben Affleck was originally attached to this, and there were some changes going through, but when you watch this trailer, we've only seen 2 minutes and 34 seconds or 2 minutes and 31 seconds, depending on the trailer. And it looks like a really singular
vision,
a singular vision that looks familiar. But it also, I don't know. What were your first thoughts after watching this trailer
Sure.
for
Yeah, I
Batman?
mean, it certainly borrows a lot. I think there's a lot of people who have been quick to identify a lot of the obvious inspirations. But, you're right. Going into this, when I heard Matt Reeves scored the job, I didn't think, I think a lot of people were very into the idea of a Ben Affleck Batman. And I got kind of worried because I think Ben's perfectly competent. I do. I think he probably would have done a fine job. Maybe he will someday. I don't know what that arrangement looks like with his parent company. But these movies, right? If being the Tim Burton fan that I am, I do think it requires somebody with a bit of a riskier, quote unquote, maybe singular as you put it, take. And I don't know if Ben Affleck has that. I don't know if his decision or his choice rather to direct something like that, like a Batman movie, felt, and not by his own fault, perhaps. I think it was just by the interference within the studio, felt like a bit of a committee decision. So I was very pleased to see that, DC and Warner's have sort of embraced this director-driven approach, which, I think is partly a learning from the Marvel universe, but at the same time, they're sort of off the wagon, so to speak, on this idea of everything has to fall in place like a jigsaw puzzle, the way that Marvel movies do, right? We've seen the Joker work out splendidly for them commercially.
Pretty well.
Yeah. And I mean, there are certain hangups I and others might have with it, but I do think that ultimately giving that sort of freedom and autonomy to people like those directors, it pays off more often than not. So I was very happy to hear about the Matt Reeves scoring the job. And then, I'll say it here before I forget. I have no receipts on this. I'm not a Twitter poster on a great frequency, but I will say before any casting was announced, there was only one A-list, B-list, whatever you want to call him, known actor, who I saw in this role as Batman. And I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. Because you talk about fan casting, and you get, fans think they know what they want, and, usually it's just some generic, stereotypical, fan cast, and it never really happens because studios know, sometimes they try to pick the unexpected surprise. And that, to me, the one I wanted, the only one I wanted, was Robert Pattinson.
Wow.
So I feel very vindicated, and I guess we can get to that in a little bit. But, I think between those two announcements, I was very excited. And I think, going back to your question in a really roundabout way, just seeing those obvious fingerprints of stuff like, Silence of the Lambs and Seven especially, have just reconfirmed and reaffirmed everything that I think a lot of us fans have wanted for a long time, right? This idea of a detective story. It's astonishing to me, and I don't want to say it's many people, but it's still a fair amount of people who don't realize that Batman is a detective first. He was DC is Detective Comics. That's what it stands for. So this idea of him being, a sleuth, that kind of thing, not just a guy running around in a cape as a superhero, is somewhat unique and different and something unexpected to a lot of people. So I'm excited for it. I'm really just thrilled to see that they're taking this direction.
No, absolutely. You can, there's so many shades. You are right. There's shades of Seven in there, but also Matt Reeves talked about Chinatown and French Connection, and I think people forget how much detective work was in those films. So French Connection, people want to talk about the
and it's very on the ground.
Yeah,
and that's what's different. It's not like Christian Bale, loading up turrets and blasting a bullet through all concrete, right, and taking ballistics. Like, that's cool, but it's not the kind of comic book detective work that I think a lot of fans have been clamoring for.
I want to do something. I think Popeye Doyle takes more steps in French Connection than Samwise and Frodo do in the Lord of the Rings trilogies.
Right.
I mean,
let's look at the pedometer stats for those two characters.
He and Roy Scheider pound the pavement on that. And I also, it was interesting. So the first thing that crossed my mind is I looked up the cinematographer and I looked up the production designer.
Fraser, yeah.
So the production designer, he's James Chinland, and he has worked on. So I looked at the vibe of this movie and just the amount of Easter eggs in there with the various photos, but it's very grimy. It's very.
Well, it's grungy, and that's
grungy. There it is.
With the Nirvana,
it's like the Crow
that's sort of retrofitted with Mike Giacchino's theme. So yeah, there's definitely a grime and a grunge to it. I love that.
But this DP had worked on Requiem for a Dream, and he had worked on The Fountain, 25th Hour, 1 hour photo. When you think about 1 hour photo, there's a lot of
sterile.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that look of it. He can master different art. So you have 25th Hour,
Very
in in the club, in the the various lights. It's very dark, but then you do have some really nice blues and reds. Then you have the sterile 1 hour photo, which 1 hour photo, you're in a sterile place. You have the grunge of Requiem for a Dream. And I mean, even War for the Planet of the Apes, that's a post-apocalyptic world, so there is grunge.
A lot of range.
Yeah. And I mean, Fountain, I adore. So I was looking at that, and then you have Greg Fraser. I mean, the dude's done Zero Dark 30, Rogue One, The Mandalorian, Foxcatcher, and also there's 2 things. He did Let Me In, but he also did Killing Them Soft. And it's one of those movies that received an F cinema score, but I really enjoyed it. I mean, James Gandolfini does a lot of breathing in it, but I love how down and dirty it is, and how grimy. And so you have Matt Reeves, who, I mean, Let Me In, you see some of that aesthetic. The War for the Planet of the Apes movies, you see that, and then you bring in this DP and this production designer, and I think it's made a really nice marriage of Seven-esque. I hate making comparisons because it's really easy, and I think it can be reductive. It can prevent you from maybe thinking of better words to describe a film.
Sure.
But I love grungy, and
there's a lot of texture to it, and I think it's to its benefit because a lot of people, myself included, were sort of interested in this idea of setting, right? When is this era? And I think just by the 25% that's been shot, obviously there's an iPhone or a smartphone in somewhere in the trailer and stuff, but it is almost deliberately an amalgamation of a lot of different architectures and aesthetics. You got a lot of high tech in it, but it's not showy. It's not Nolan-esque, which I appreciate actually. So it does feel like maybe something that could have happened in the 90s or 80s or 70s. So I like that it's just sort of nebulous, maybe.
It reminds me, I know I keep saying this, but it does remind me a little bit of It Follows, where you're just thinking, when is this? You have a clamshell e-reader. You have different themes.
And I think it's less about anchoring it in time, right, and more about not constantly reminding the audience, right, with these different artifacts you bring in.
Now, with this character, I was just thinking about this, and I want to see what you think. I just thought about this. So, when we move towards having you have the Schumacher Batmans. It's very bright, colorful, super villains. So you in that world, you can have more of a righteous Batman because its villains are so.
It can't be.
Yeah,
it can't.
But then you have Keaton's Batman, his 2 films, where Keaton takes a beating. You taught me that, where he sits in his chair and he waits to get called so he can, beat the hell out of people. And I love that. But then you kind of think about an older Batman, and it's like this guy had a lot of anger in him, but now he's older and he's still going out there and beating people up. It's kind of I don't know if I want that. Like I want, but I also don't want to. I don't need no one. Everyone complains. I don't want to see Martha and his father get killed again. I don't want. I don't want. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
No, that's a fair, I think, complaint. I don't think there's anything wrong with whining about that. I mean, how many have we had? You're the movie math guy. Like, just in the past 15 years, we've had the Nolan iteration, we've had the Gotham TV version, we've had the Joker version, which holy hell, and then we have, of course, the Zack Snyder version. So right there. So I think that's fair, and I like the approach that this is a year 2 presumably, and that yes, there's trauma there, but it's informed by the incident in question. We don't need to rehash it and that kind of thing. So, when we're talking about different stages of Batman, right, the campy version, and which is funny because I think we also spoke somewhat briefly about this idea of the Schumacher cut, which admittedly was much deeper, and not nearly as deep as something like these movies, but it did have this entire subplot of why he chooses to be Batman and that fateful night and yada yada and confronting the Bat. So even in a campy movie like that, there are those shades of something darker. But I think with something like this new one, the Pattinson iteration, I'm excited because he is younger. He's not starting out entirely, but he's still rough around the edges. And also, just on that note, like, can I just say he looks the part finally? Like, you look at these movies like Christian Bale, he's perfect. Like, he's a very handsome man. Does he look tortured? I'm telling you, I don't think